restorative practices in community circles. Who knows how to define what a restorative practice is?
I can tell you about restorative practices.
Restorative practices are a set of actions and beliefs that are used in various settings, including educational settings and criminal justice settings. Restorative practices involve preventing harm through strong relationships, as well as repairing harm by rebuilding relationships. What that looks like is it looks like creating a strong relationship between people before any conflict occurs, and if conflict does occur, repairing that conflict and repairing that harmed relationship by asking who was harmed in this conflict. Restorative practices have been used by Indigenous peoples and religious groups for a long time, and they've more recently been implemented into the criminal justice system and the educational system. When restorative practices are implemented in schools, there are several positive effects, including improving student socio-emotional skills. When students improve their socio-emotional skills, they have improved ability to share their emotions with one another. That's because they practice that through restorative practices when they're building relationships. They also have improved self-efficacy, meaning they're able to advocate for themselves and just conduct themselves in a more efficacious manner. Finally, students are able to self-regulate better, meaning that they're able to control their emotions and control the reactions to respond appropriately to their peers. In addition, restorative practices have the positive effect of improving school climate. One way that occurs is through a decrease in punitive discipline, meaning instead of a punishment being handed to a student kind of understands what happened, and is able to repair that rather than just getting detention, getting suspended. Finally, when an improved school climate occurs, there's increased dialogue and connection among students. And what that means is it means students are able to express themselves through their sharing emotions and self-efficacy so that they create a strong relationship with their peers. However, there are some challenges to implementing restorative practices that are important to consider at the beginning of this discussion as well. One is student frustration. Students can feel frustrated that their classmates are not as engaged with the process of restorative practices as they are. They can also feel frustrated that their classmates are messing around instead of focusing in. Students can also feel disappointed that their classmates are not engaging deeply or that their peers are not buying into what they're working on. Finally, there's also a need for differentiation in implementing restorative practices, as there is with all things involving education. What that means is it means students who have disabilities, students who are learning English as a new language, or students who are just not at the same level of maturity as their classmates may need some extra support in a restorative practice setting. Finally, facilitators and teachers who are running restorative practices also need support and continued education. To address these challenges, one key thing that should be implemented if possible is creating a community circle a restorative practice community circle that's voluntary, meaning that students choose to participate rather than being forced to participate. That will increase their buy-in. If that's not possible, creating community ownership wherever possible is the next best thing. What that can look like is it can look like students helping brainstorm normative behaviors, students brainstorming procedures, students being involved wherever possible. Finally, for students who need to be differentiated for, scaffolds are really important. Those scaffolds can be something simple like an anchor chart that shows procedures or norms. It can also be more complex, like talking about what the topic of the restorative practices that day will be in class prior, so the students have time to think about it before. Finally, creating a school culture that values restorative practices and values teacher education is really important for implementing restorative practices.
Wow, that was really interesting. But wait, I teach 4th grade. How is this going to look in my elementary classroom?
I can tell you all about how this will be incorporated in an elementary classroom.
In the elementary classroom, restorative practices and community circles can take several different forms. One of the most common ways that you'll see this done is through the morning meeting. A morning meeting is an activity that is done every day, routinely, when the students first come to class. It's a great way to check in with each and every student, giving each person a voice and an opportunity to let you know their concerns, what they're excited for in the day, and in general, just talk to one another. This is a great chance for every single student to come in to a smiling face and a happy environment and start off their day in a positive way. A second way that the community circle can be used in the elementary classroom is for conflict resolution. While community circles can be proactive, they can also be useful as reactive measures. So if there is an issue that arises in the classroom, if two students are fighting, or if there's becoming a problem, or you're seeing something wrong with the culture of the classroom, a community circle can be a great way to address this issue. So using the restorative practices involved in making sure that everyone has a chance to speak and that they can practice empathy with one another, community circles can be a great way to resolve conflict without harming one another's feelings, and in a way that is able to mend the relationships that are broken or harmed between the students. Finally, community circles can be used as a really great community building activity, regardless of the time of day. So whether you are playing games with one another, you can have this after recess as a time to let off some energy or get back into the learning environment. Students can use this for SEL learning and really just have a lot of time to spend with one another and get to know each other better. This will help to form a community that is strong and cares for one another, and it will allow each student to really form the empathy and care for one another and for the teacher that will help lead to a successful and thriving classroom.
Great, now I know that it's really important for me to have a community circle, but I'm not sure what I should do next.
I got you. I have a list of goals for my community circle.
Every elementary teacher's classroom is going to look a little bit different, but no matter what you choose to do during community circle time, it's important that you're rooted in 3 core goals. The first goal is to strengthen human bonds. So to have a time to interact, talk, and listen that's not class time and it's not recess time is extremely important. This allows the teacher to student relationship to form, and it also encourages student to student friendships to form. The second one helps them with all sorts of social skills, which we'll touch on later. And the first one is especially important because if we break down this disconnect and this sense of hierarchy between faculty and student, the students will be more naturally motivated, they'll want to succeed, and they will want to continue coming to class. The second goal is to build social skills, especially important for this age group, upper elementary. They are just kind of learning how to maturely interact. So having a time where they are required to actively listen, to show signs of connection, whether that's verbal or nonverbal. Also knowing when it's their turn to speak and when it's not. That's a very important social skill they'll need for the rest of their lives. Community circle gives you a time to collaborate. However, it's low stakes, so they don't feel a high pressure, or they don't feel like they are being judged, but they do need to work together and kind of figure out that social balance. And finally, we want to establish absence of threat in our classrooms. This consistency of community circle is so valuable for our students, especially when they don't experience consistency outside of school. They have clear expectations that every day when they come in, they will have this safe time. It also breaks down the hierarchy, as I mentioned earlier, of teacher and student, and also student to student. It gives everyone an equal voice, and that provides a sense of safety as well. So no matter what you do in your community circle, be sure to strengthen the human bonds, build social skills, and establish an absence of threat in your classroom.
That was some great advice, Liv. Thank you so much. All right, team, let's do this.
The norms of a community circle are really important as well. And so some of the norms of a community circle should be that the facilitator is talking with participants, not for or at them. In addition, creating a collective ownership of the space is very important. This can be achieved through a variety of methods. One way might be by creating as a class a community talking piece. So that might be involved every student decorating a tile or a popsicle stick that's then glued onto a larger object that then is passed around the circle for talking. In addition, each person should have a turn to speak regardless of whether or not they choose to take that opportunity. So when the talking stick is passed around the circle, everyone should have an opportunity to hold it and get that attention from their classmates and their peers. Finally, active listening is another key component of a community circle. That means students are not just waiting to speak themselves, but are actually listening to what their classmates have to say.
We're now going to share some practical applications of community circles that you can use in your own classroom. So what does a community circle actually look like? Well, the structure of a community circle is outlined in 4 steps. The first being a greeting or focusing moment. And this can be through meditation or any sort of body scan, but it's that period of time in which all of the students and yourself sit around in a circle and you get centered and ready to start your community circle together. Now, this can be through a meditation, it can be through a body scan, or the Hoberman ball breathing exercise, which is a really cool one. So you would ask a student of yours or yourself, and you use a Hoberman ball, and then it's one of those balls that you pull apart and that collapse back in, and you would instruct the students to breathe in when the ball is being pulled apart and breathe out when it's coming back in together. So it's a visual reminder of what they're supposed to be doing to balance their breathing and to balance their nervous systems, and also get everyone focused and ready to go for the circle. After that is the feelings check-in time, and this is a time where every student has the opportunity to share and just reflect on how they're feeling, how their day yesterday went, or how they're hoping their day today goes. An example question of this might be, what is something that made you smile yesterday? And then students would be able to go around in a circle and share just one thing, maybe 20 seconds or less, that made them smile yesterday. The third step is an activity portion. So an activity you might use for this third step is, let's share what we wish someone else would say to us when we make a mistake. So here students are invited to share, to listen to one another, to work on those social listening and communication skills. And they're also learning about one another. So if I see my classmate and hear my classmate say that they wish that they could be corrected by just little whispered reminders, I can know next time, okay, I think I'm going to do that for them the next time I have something to say. Another idea of an activity is something that you see maybe in the bottom left corner of this picture. So this was in my 4th grade classroom, and students had just a little checklist of cool facts. And I knew each of the cool facts on the sheet applied to at least one other student in my classroom. And so it was their job to go and ask around to see if they could discover which of those cool facts applied to which of their classmates. And so this is working on social skills. This is working on asking questions, listening to one another, and also they get to find out some cool, unique things about their classmates in the process. The 4th step is the closing, and this is when you are to affirm the students' participation in the circle and provide space for the circle to peacefully close. So it is possible that in a community circle, something might come up that's particularly difficult or upsetting, and you want to make sure that it's not just left out there and there's no sort of closure. You have to make sure that you're affirming the students, thanking them for their vulnerability, for their honesty, and for their participation, and also making sure that nothing's left loose and all the loose ends are sort of tied up together so that you're ready to move on with the rest of your school day. And the physical features of community circle, you can see in the picture of my classroom to the left of the screen there, all participants should be sitting in a circle at equal eye level. So as the teacher, I'm sitting down too, just like my students are. I'm not in some chair, I'm not standing up, but I'm seated as a visual reminder of the equal status in the community circle. So I, being the facilitator and the teacher, I am actively participating in the circle in sharing and being vulnerable and honest, but I'm not dominating the circle. It's not time for me to lecture or to take a ton of time talking about an idea. Rather, it should be an equal status time for people to be open and to share and to feel safe.
As I mentioned earlier, community circle is all about building relationships. And so one successful way that I did this in my classroom last year was by giving each student a spotlight moment, the students who wanted that. And so this was successful by doing a show and tell. I held show and tell weekly, and each week one student would be chosen to bring in 2 to 3 objects that they felt represented themselves, their personality, their family, and even their culture. They would present that object. So we saw some food, some dress, we had some sports regalia, all sorts of things. And then their classmates were invited to ask questions. So as you see in this picture, this was taken in my classroom, and this is my student giving her show and tell. She brought in a dress, and her classmates are listening actively, and they are ready to ask questions. Another successful way to create bonds is by doing read-alouds. Now, read-alouds are not only helpful in forming relationships. Read-alouds are important because they provide social emotional learning opportunities for students. They dive into feelings, they dive into human stories that make students think and start to think metacognitively about their own emotions. So here on the screen, I have a couple of my favorites, and they're all really helpful to start a discussion or maybe start a journal entry or something where the student thinks a little bit deeper. And doing this as one big unit makes everyone feel closer, especially when we do go down the discussion route. And it makes them carry the messages from the book throughout the day, and they're treating their classmates with greater kindness, greater empathy if they read a book like You Are Special, for example. So these are 2 ways, show and tell and read alouds, that really helped me make connections during my community circles.
One of the major challenges facing any first-year teacher is managing the short amount of time that they have with students each day. Community circles do take up time, but they are worth it. In a community circle, you can build in academic skills, such as writing in journals, talking with one another, having them discuss questions of social studies, science, and getting them curious about these subjects. This will allow them to work on their skill of transfer as well, taking skills in one subject and applying them elsewhere, and helping them realize that, science, social studies, no subject is isolated from any of the others. Also, the community circle will help them to build skills in collaboration, something that they will use their entire academic careers. By working with one another, learning to discuss problems with one another, being curious, asking questions, these questions and these skills that they will build will help them in every subject that they have. It'll help them throughout elementary, throughout middle, and even into high school as well. Finally, this time you take in the community circle will overall save you time dealing with behavioral issues and issues in the classroom that would arise without this community being built. It's so important, especially early on in the year, to form a community that is willing to collaborate and work well with one another, a community that cares for one another and has empathy, and that listens to one another. Without these skills and these procedures in place, there will be much more time wasted on dealing with issues that come up between the students, trying to create an environment of learning, and really trying to get students to buy into the learning process. The community circle can be great for both academic learning, having them journal, having them use these skills across broad subjects, and learning the collaboration skills that will help them in this classroom and as they continue their academic careers.